Hola, buenos días. Vamos.
Good morning. So we are going to get started. What a fantastic day we have ahead of us. We've been preparing this session for a long time. So thank you so much for being here with us. What a big day for action. This is our first meeting, and let's hope that many more will come after. So thank you so much for supporting us so that we can all be here at AMA, ICA, and of course thank you to San Sebastian International Film Festival. First of all, let's welcome Camilo Vázquez, the Subdirector for International Relations from the ICA, from the Ministry of Culture. Thank you very much. Egunon, Imbas, good morning. My name is Camilo Vázquez. I represent ICA. I apologize on behalf of Ignacy Camos. He hasn't been able to be here. We are so pleased to participate at this first meeting. These initiatives are very important because it is essential to work together to generate networks so as to be able to share good ideas, complaints, proposals, and from the public administration point of view, that is so very useful. So I encourage you to keep on working. This is the first edition, but we are going to be following your conversations and paying attention to your proposals being made here within the context of this film festival. I would also like to highlight the importance of talent for us. Talent is vital, fundamental. We have to try and become better and better, and there we are to try and support talent in Spain. And we have a subsidy line for script writing, and that is something new, and we are so proud about it. We are very proud about those subsidies because in this moment of budgetary uncertainty, being able to have 8 million euros for script writers, it is a huge success. And we are fascinated. We've been fascinated to see that we have received more than 4,000 script proposals, scripts that are being assessed right now. That shows it is an example of the interest of the creative strength that exists in Spain. For filmmakers and for script writers, and for people who are both things at the same time, this is so very important, being able to have these subsidies so as to help you promote and develop your creative ideas. That is what I wanted to highlight. So I would like to encourage all of you to keep on going. This is a highly interesting proposal, and yes, we are going to be following you in further editions of this meeting. So as I was saying, here we are, thanks to the support given from ICA, but also thanks to Foundation Sky. And Antonio Gens is going to address a few words to us, and he's also a member of Action. Hello, good morning. Thank you, San Sebastian Film Festival, for helping us organize this event. SGAE Foundation, our foundation, of course, is involved because we need to support filmmakers. That is essential. Here in Spain, we do not have a filmmakers association. There are many different associations, so the only thing we have is you, Action. So from our foundation, of course, we have to be here supporting you because that implies supporting filmmakers and script writers. This is a highly significant initiative, and it should only be the beginning of many more. I hope that year after year from now on, we'll be able to meet here so as to speak about our concerns, issues, goals. Thank you, Pilar Perez, for the organization of this event. SGAE Foundation will always be supporting you.
Muchísimas gracias. También iban a estar hoy aquí con nosotros.
We have Virginia Yagüe. Well, we wanted to have her, but she hasn't been able to come. She wasn't feeling well. We also have Dama. And of course, thank you to the San Sebastian Film Festival. Why are we organizing this meeting, this event? I've been talking to each of you, and we all agree. We need a network. We need to join our forces to be stronger. Many things are happening at the national and international level, and it is true that together we'll be stronger. And these networks are essential. It is as if, filmmakers up to this moment were working on an individual basis, but that has to change. It is more and more important to be united, to come together, to become stronger once again. We want to generate spaces for debate. We're going to be sharing ideas and proposals because we also have the institutions here. And the goal is to improve and to transform the current day situation. And through meetings such as this one, we want filmmakers to have the recognition they deserve. Very often we see that there are, for example, producers and script writers associations. And we filmmakers need to do something, become stronger, so as to be heard, so that our voice can be heard. And also because we need to have a public image as creators, and we need to be respected and taken into account. That is why we are all here. I think that you, the partners, you know about the different activities and roundtables. So this is also an open event. And I don't know if you have all the information, so let me refer to it. So first roundtable, we're going to be talking about creative freedom, and we're going to be having Pablo Berger, Isaquela Cuesta, Daniela Fergerman, Julio Medam, and Ines Pares. Then at 11 o'clock, we'll be having an international meeting. We're going to be writing the European Manifesto. European associations such as FERA, SRF. Thank you for the effort made by the presidents of those international associations to be here. We're working a lot with different Spanish institutions, but we have to be working with Brussels because we are talking about the laws negotiated there. And, we need to have a voice in Brussels as well. That is very, very important, more and more. And at 1 o'clock, we'll be talking about the role of directors, producers. We need to support the role of those filmmakers, producers. Sometimes we have to be producers at the same time we filmmakers. And we'll have Elena Taberna, Manuel Martín Cuenca, Paula Palacios, and Javier Balaguer. And at 4 o'clock, we'll be talking about directing and series. Very often, filmmakers, directors, it is through series when they come and work together. Different directors have to agree and work together around the same project. And we'll have Belén Macías, Ramón Salazar, and Juana Macías. So that's it. And of course, Antonio Gens will be the moderator. What an interesting day we have ahead of us. I hope that you will enjoy it. And let's hope that it will only be the beginning and that we will be able to keep on meeting next year and the years to come.
¿Están todos los integrantes ya de la primera mesa?
We have the members of this first panel. Inés París, the moderator, Pablo Berger, Isaki La Cuesta, Daniela Fejerman, and Julio Medem.
Hola, pues buenos días.
Good morning. It is a pleasure being here. What a responsibility to start moderating this first panel. So let's try and be agile. There are so many things to talk about. And some of us are here, sitting here, but all of you there, I am sure that you also want to participate, and of course, you will have a voice. We have a bit more than an hour to start. We are all professionals, we're all filmmakers, and the members of the panel are very well known. But very briefly, once again, 4 people who are essential for cinema in Spain in these last 30 years. Daniela, we are friends, Daniela and myself. We started working together, and Daniela is one of the first women filmmakers in this country, together with Maria Ripoll, for example. One of the first who, for the very first time, turned comedy into something where women could work, as filmmakers, as directors, taking the lead. Pablo Berger. Pablo is very well known, one of our, well, I'm sure he's one of the most international authors, rewarded in many different occasions. And creative freedom is something essential for him. And now Julio Medem on my left. He has been essential for many different generations in our country. And Isaki La Cuesta, somebody who has been able to move us deeply with many different films. And now this year you have a documentary I still have not watched. We are going to be talking about something which is essential, key, creative freedom. What are we talking about? Creative freedom. We are talking, of course, about why have we become filmmakers? Because we want to speak about the world, how we understand the world. Some of us are also script writers, and that is linked to the story we want to speak. But, just choosing how we want to tell a story, that also implies creative freedom. Is this freedom today possible? That is the question. I was at the Cervantes movie theater talking about Berlanga, and one of the central issues is censorship, because all that generation of filmmakers had to fight against censorship. We do not have that political censorship, but there is another important and interesting censorship, which is the censorship coming from the market. We have to try and convince, right, and seduce so that film we have in mind can take place. Market censorship. And we are not only speaking about how is the market going to be reacting, but also how do the distributors, for example, react, and how we tackle our fears, because we have the desire to please, and maybe that can end up interfering in our freedom. And something essential in the film industry today is that, if we speak about public policies, we have to be talking about investing on development, and that is key so that we can tell the stories we want to tell. But producers are paying less and less for the story, for the pre-production, and also, and that is something we'll be speaking about, is what is the situation? What is the position of the audiovisual hub? Is the audiovisual have investing in creativity, or are we just going to end up being a studio for international shootings? So many different ideas. I'm going to be proposing a first question. Please tell me, have you been free from the creative point of view? Yes or not? And up to what point is that creative freedom important? And then I try to be very practical, and then we will say it is true and what should be done in the light of the current day situation. Okay, I'm going to start. Thank you, Ines. We foreshare that we are both things, script writers and filmmakers. We speak about personal stories. Creative freedom is also an illusion because we know that cinema is an art, and each of us try and do our best what we can. In my case, I have been able to make the films I wanted to make. We are talking only about 4 feature films, 4 in 25 years, but with my first short film, I think that short films, as you know, it is like a testing field, and I made a mama in the 1980s. The art director was Alex de la Iglesia. We met when we were at university, and at that point, we were just like a punk group making movies without knowing anything before even going to school. And that short film that came out of my gut like an alien reached the audience, and we were so surprised when we were giving the award in Bilbao and in Alcalá, and my short film was able to travel. So we realized that making personal film and telling those little stories, there was an audience there for you, wide enough to support us. And that was the very first experience, that very short film. And Alex and myself decided to be filmmakers. And then Torremolinos, and then Robert Reams and all the others came. So how lucky I am, how fortunate. But all through this journey, I've been able to work hand in hand with producers. Sometimes they are the bad guys of the film, but in my personal case, without producers, I would not have been able to have creative freedom. Both in Torremolinos as well as Sandra Tapia or Ignacy, they have been supporting me from the very beginning. So I wanted to express the importance of having a producer by your side. I agree with you. Big films in Spanish film needed that couple, the filmmaker and the producer. That is essential. So how fortunate, how lucky. What about you, Daniela? I'm here to speak from the point of view of somebody who did not have that permanent support or that permanent assistance. I am surrounded by 3 authors who have had a very important recognition, and they have been able, I'm sure, to work with freedom. But that is not my case. I am less important. I do not have the same recognition as my 3 colleagues. And if I go back in time, I don't know if you will agree, because we made the first film together, Ines and myself, and we started directing because we wanted to tell our stories from the beginning till the end. We were script writers. And I think that first film, A mi madre le gustan las mujeres, maybe that is when, we felt freer. It was a struggle, but we were able to make the film we wanted to make. That is true. For example, producers. The first producers we went to said to us, what? You are going to be talking about a woman who falls in love with another woman? Is that a comedy? No. you should be making a drama. So we were not understood. And then what happened? The film, was well accepted, widely accepted, and that seemed to start opening doors up to us, but we wanted to do something completely different for the second film. We decided to make a second comedy because when something seems to be working, the industry is asking for more of the same thing. So something happened, and it is that we had more money. We had a bigger budget. In general, women filmmakers, we have lower budgets compared to men, and that is something we should be talking about. That is the situation. Another struggle, another battle. When you do not have the last word, you have to make concessions. For example, in the casting, we were convinced, but our ideas were rejected by the producer. And he said, no, I do not want this actress. And we had to accept his proposal. So many films later, I ended up connecting with what I wanted to speak about. Yes, La Adopción was my fourth film. But, it was difficult to make it happen, just like I wanted. And now I would like to launch another question. What are we willing to yield, to give away? Because we had to be shooting in an eastern country, and at a certain point, suddenly the producer spoke about the Canary Islands. And I ended up thinking, what if I have to go and shoot in the Canary Islands? I go to the Canary Islands. I just want to make my movie. Imagine, up to what point? When do you have to say no? Either like that or don't count on me. And after this experience, I found refuge in theater. Suddenly, after fighting and struggling against producers, I found that I could go to the theater, and there I found a space where I did not have to be negotiated. We had the actors, the text, and that's it. Of course, we were free to do whatever we wanted to do. So that's it. That's what I wanted to tell you. Let's continue. Daniela has been sharing with us many different ideas, right? Combining the industrial and the artistic side is something different. So that is why she decided to go to theater, but some people end up writing and they end up going towards literature. What about you, Julio? I feel so fortunate, so privileged. How did I start? It was like a dream. It was a dream because I found the best possible producer, and they gave me total freedom. I know that my case is very particular, very specific. I agree with everything you said. But it is true that, my case was very specific in terms of freedom. We are creators, and we want to be free. First, we write the screenplay, and then we want to make the film. And there are so many things that are going to be happening in this mysterious world. There is so much suspense, but I love it. For me, creation, it is not something... I do not use... I do not put my reasoning there. No. For me, there is something that is essential. Let me try to explain it. This is a feeling that I have. And it is true that it is difficult. So I would like to insist once again on the importance of producers. I have had excellent producers at the beginning. Maybe they changed later, but at the beginning, Sogecine. I had Sogecine, Fernando García, Conde de Laguna, Enrique López Laviña, wonderful producers. And when I was writing something, sometimes they said, listen, you are getting away to the original idea. So I'm thinking about images. I let them flow. I look out of the window, I see something, and then I say, I want to open the door even if I do not know where that is taking me. But there is an image that is seducing me and telling me, there is a mystery here. Here, there is something to find, to identify, with cows, with vacas. I saw this person cutting wood, and he suddenly hears his competitor in the other valley doing the same thing, and he realizes that he would like to keep up with the same rhythm, and he throws his axe towards the trees. That was the beginning. I prefer not to think. I do not want things to be rational. I have a kid in myself. I have a little child and doesn't grow up. And there he is, that little child, and I let him run away and go wherever he wants to. And he comes to me and he discovers so many images, and I love it. That is my approach. And then at a certain point, all that enigmatic and mysterious thing appear in full flesh. And now the judge, reason, appears. And then I say, but what is this? What am I talking about? I enjoy not knowing what am I talking about. When I am writing, I prefer not to know. I do not want to know what is going to be coming next, because if I know the ending, no, that is something I do not like. I always try to become surprised myself, to find unexpected things. That is how I work. I was lucky enough to start working, making movies with my father. My father was using Super 8. Imagine, that was magic. And together with my sister, he had many different cameras, and I used to take it. Well, my father was Germanic. He was German, my father. And he didn't let us use that camera. And I am talking about it because, Medem is a German family name. I am Basque. My mother was Basque, but my father was German. Well, we also have Germanic romanticism, but he taught me how to frame, how to edit, but I wanted to do something completely different. So I prefer to follow the spirit of my mom, who was a designer. So I would take the camera together with Anna, my sister, who was a painter. I dedicated the film to her, and I remember that once, at one point, it was so expensive, and suddenly, by accident, the camera was there shooting on a corner, and I decided to go and take a look at that, to that corner, and I said, gee, that is incredible. I have captured something, that space and time, and suddenly that was the most mysterious and stimulating thing I could have for my subconscious. That is how I work. That is why I said at the beginning that I leave reason out. Then I wanted to come and to invite it, but I want to have that subconscious approach. And it was silent. Yes, I enjoy very much silent movies. Your Blancanieves, your Snow White was so fascinating. And then I use music in a very particular way because I need music to be disturbing everything. Well, disturbing, maybe it is not the right term, but I need music and images living together. For me, that is something essential. I was lucky enough to start working with Alberto Iglesias up until Lucía y el Sexo, and with Mama as well. He was there. Now I am working with Lucas Vidal, a marvelous composer, and with others. For me, it is essential to have a good composer, a good music composer, so that my images can end up having that meaning and that strength. Yes, what you are saying is so very interesting. We are speaking about how to preserve our inner freedom, right? So I have been able to work like that. They have let me be. And being creative implies having that mystery alive. Isaki. In my case, when I started, I had this vocation and I pictured myself making poetic films, documentaries, Star Wars, something very eclectic. So my very first films, I was able to make them. And then the more expensive fictions ended up being more complicated, where they were just more expensive, and that is why they were harder to make. Within that realm of poetic film having lower budgets, it is true that I had much more freedom compared to colleagues working in fiction. That was as clear as that. In terms of the final editing, for me, the hardest thing was always to find the money, the production, designing the whole thing. That was the hardest thing. Yes, because everybody wanted to be shooting 7 weeks, so my films were different, with different budgets, different sizes, different crews, and we didn't know very well about how to make it happen. But that was very hard, that whole process. When we started shooting, I was already exhausted. And that is why at a certain point we decided to start producing our own films. And that was so difficult, as you can imagine. So next, we decided to be minority producers. And that is the formula I'm using now. So that started when we started co-producing in La Próxima Piel, when we started working with fiction. I have to say that that creative freedom also requires a specific budget. Up to my 6th film, the budget was 400,000, 1 million. With Los Pasos Dobles, we had 1 million, but we ended up making 2 films. Up until my 6th film, I didn't have 2 million euros. And then when I started doing fiction and having a bigger budget, I have been lucky enough to have good producers, and for the final cut or the final editing, we have never had problems. We have been able to reach agreements.
I make a difference between films that are considered as my movies. This can be a proposal by a production company. Los Pasos Dobles is given by Michel Atienza, and then for me it's my film of the Segundo Premio. It's a proposal by Cristóbal from La Terraza, but it's my film. And I defend it. It's mine. Flores para Antonio comes from Alba Flora. It's for her and for her family. It's not my film. This film is for them and their family. So I'm not going to discuss about the shots, the sequence, or anything. The film is for them. My creative freedom is to work for their wishes. Yesterday we had an interview with a Frenchman. He was making a report on Spanish movies, and like sometimes we complain too much. Now we are in a family, we can say the truth. After this conversation, I remembered a lot of things, because sometimes we forget. Half of my films, I just stopped after 2 or 3 weeks. We cannot do the film as I want. I leave, and then there was a negotiation there. I'm saying no, I'm not doing it. I left on many occasions. What happened? They asked me, they begged me not to leave. That was in my past. That was a chaos. A director cannot disappear 2 weeks before the shooting. So we've been opening up new ways of rebuilding the film. How can we do it better? It's not funny. It was traumatic. I understand. It's a very, very daring idea, just leaving 2 weeks before the shooting. I was thinking about pragmatic elements. I remembered one of the most interesting books on the possibilities to be creative in life is one's own room by Virginia Woolf. No woman can be creative if she hasn't got an auntie lending her a lot of money because she needs money to write. So you have to take care of your inner child, and now you want to do things for you and for others. When you start to think about a story, you give it a shape, you give it a form. What are you living out? What are you earning? The problem in this country, in this profession, is that you need money. You need to survive. Only rich people can make movies. Our audiovisual sector is asking for diversity, not just rich people making movies. Your creative freedom starts because you have money to live out, you have earnings. How do you make a living? Yes, we live with little, with style, and we never complain. I haven't been a privileged person. I had to work to have this freedom. But that's the question that everybody asks me. How can you live? How can you pay your mortgage? I had the luck to work in film schools. Before making Torremolinos 33, I went to New York Film Academy, and I was teaching there. I'm doing script writing teaching, so the academic world allowed me to have some money to be in the network. Isaki, you and myself, we are minority producers. Fortunately, all my movies, and I touch wood here, my movies have worked, and I have earnings and income as a producer and as a director and as a teacher. In my case, I make very few movies, but I cannot do it if you don't have money to do that. You need to find your formula, your recipe to keep your freedom while living. I had 2 stages. I was a TV script writer. The problem is it takes all the time out of you. I don't have enough time. I have colleagues of my generation. They are working as script writers for daily episodes. How do they do? 50 pages every day. How do they do it? Do they have time to generate new projects? I don't think so. My second phase, my second stage, was academia and teaching. I really enjoy being a teacher, but the problem is that I earn very little money. I give classes on many master's courses, but I don't earn my living. In order to have time to write, we need development. I don't know if this is a topic for later. There are new script writing subsidies in Spain, and I suppose everyone wants to have a subsidy. After 10 years, at last, there is a call for, there's a tender. But it's not enough. When I delivered the last script that had a subsidy 10 years ago, I was so happy that this is going to be ready again. 4,000 candidates will apply, and then only 200 subsidies will be given. So it's impossible. We cannot generate our commitment in development because we have no money for that. In the last few years, I was paid for development, and I could go home and write. But now the answer is, fantastic, give me the script, and I will pay you later if it works. I cannot do that upstream. I cannot do it in advance. It's impossible. I can pay you this little thing so that you can do all your job for months, and if the movie works, then you will be paid more. Several years ago, it was forbidden to apply with a script to national subsidy without being paid. The contract says, okay, when the film goes to pre-production, you will be paid, but that's too late. Okay. My first years, I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and I had no money. I lived in San Sebastian, and I worked in a bar, and I was a cinema critic in a newspaper because I loved cinema. And I wanted to write. And I won a critic competition. I was in Lezo, in the newspaper, and I was very young, and I was taken, and I was on my motorbike and my critics, my cinema critics, and in Rumblefish conference, Juancho Dumal.
Tú no serás por atrás. Tú no serás Julio Medem, ¿no?
And we were friends. Cinema was in the center of my life when I was very young. I was doing my Super 8 movies. My father told me, "You're very good, but you're not a captain. You cannot make cinema." I was doing my film reviews. I was so shy, and when I started to shoot vacas, I directed my actors talking to them in their ears, but I couldn't speak in public. My assistant, he could speak in public, but I directed because I was so shy. I wanted to be a psychiatrist. But I loved cinema, and when watching Rumblefish by Coppola, I said, I'm not going to be a doctor. I finished my studies, medicine studies, and I stopped there. I was never a doctor. But friends encouraged me to continue with cinema, but we were living in a very small village. We had no money to live in San Sebastian. Our son, Peru, was born in 1988. I worked at home. I was with my son. And I wanted to make movies. I made some shorts, and we had an award in Bilbao. And then I had the idea of my first feature film, Vacas. I had nothing at one point in time. We were living with my ex-wife's money. She was a doctor, family doctor, and suddenly I finished my script for Vacas. I knew about 12 producers in Madrid. I traveled to Madrid, and I was in Madrid with every one of these 12 producers. I was so shy, I tell you. I explained I was pitching my film Vacas. Twelve people. Esther Garcia told me that she regrets because she didn't produce Vacas. A new production company, Sogecine, was just starting. I remember that I was walking with my son in the mountains, and I heard the listening machine, and I heard, okay, hey, Julio. Because I sent him my shorts. Yes, we want to have Vacas for Berlin Festival. My life changed completely. I came to San Sebastian. Vacas had an award in Tokyo Festival for new directors, a very important prize. producers thought that the money was for the producer. No, it was for the director. The money was for the director. And I bought my first apartment in the old quarter here in San Sebastian with this award in Bacas, and my life changed again. I've made other movies. I had I had failures and successes like Lucia and The Sex. I suffer a lot, but I want to continue the battle. When I produce films, they are totally a disaster, failure when I work as a producer. Or I had the script of Ocho to all the producers, and they said, "Oh, it's marvelous," but nobody wanted to make the movie. So I created my own production company, ADEM, and nobody wants to produce with me. So nobody takes my scripts, nobody produces my films, but then I decided to produce Ocho, and I did it myself. I went to festivals, but the box office was terrible, a total disaster. So I'm surviving. After so many flops, I was working as a journalist. And I couldn't really pay my rent. I paid 180 euros in Barcelona at the time, but I couldn't pay my rent. The thing is, I could go to cinema for free, to concerts for free. I had free books. In fact, I was earning very little money. But then I started to teach. Before developing my first film, I was teaching in university, in film schools, script editor work. I worked on doing many things at the same time. Jorda was my teacher, and he said, "Have please 8 projects in your head because 7 will disappear, will be a flop." So I had to have various projects at the same time. So I don't want to be obsessed with one project. Or a project may succeed 10 years later. People say, "Oh, you are very prolific." But I have no choice. If I am not prolific, I cannot make a living. In the last movies, salaries have gone up because there are bigger budgets. In my case, when I listen that everything goes badly and is declining, in my case, it's not the same because I'm succeeding in my movies and I'm making more money. So I'd like to ask a last question before the Q&A session. Yesterday, we watched The Voice of Hindi, fantastic movie. It's about genocide in Gaza. When people speak about creative freedom, it would seem like it's just looking at you and looking at your internal or inner universe, and that's all. What is your relationship with reality when you create? Are you inspired by real events? Are you interested by what is happening, or is this an obstacle because you want to speak about some other things? Do you have conflicts with reality and with actual events? Well, it depends on the project. I have a series, Google Earth, because Google Earth was hiding places and locations, and another idea was about prisons and labor camps in Australia where many people died. That's another idea. But sometimes we had to choose, and I had many ideas, but I had other projects, something that have nothing to do with reality. I have more and more relationship with reality, but not at the beginning. I was looking at myself when I was young. I wasn't looking around to an extent that I just love stories and I love history. As Aspasia, the lover of Athens. I love history. I love the 5th century before Christ. I love history. And for many, many years, for 4 or 5 years, I was living within this woman in history, this Greek woman. When I write, there's a part of me, and I don't know what happens to me, there's a part that is very feminine. I'm a female. The female characters come out of me in a very natural way. I really understand, and in a natural way, how women feel. I found it with Lucia and the Sex. Then I did Caótica Ana, Habitación en Roma. So little by little, I've been more connected with reality. And this appears in my movies. It's emerging. I want to commit, because cinema is not politics, it's characters, but I'm more and more sensitive and more connected with reality, with real events. And yesterday we were in this demonstration for Gaza. La Pelota Vasca, that was another example of reality movies. Yeah, La Pelota Vasca, yep, that was a great commitment on your part. You became a frontón. Yes, I was criticized, yes. Aitor, La piel contra la piedra, that was a very committed movie. It was very daring, audacious. I was living in Madrid, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make a documentary, and then I'll make a feature film, fiction film. So I prepared the documentary, and then we premiered the feature film. And you see what happens. It was Aznar. Aznar was the president, and I was criticized because nobody could say anything about the Basque conflict. And it was about the moral conflict, because ETA was killing people, but there are tortures and other types of violence. That film was very hard for me. I suffered a lot for many years, in fact. Dani? I started my stories with personal anecdotes and things around me, real things. I realized that some of the themes could be interesting, like new forms of family, new families, new relations. But the thing is, I'm more and more affected and connected to reality. And my involvement in Palestine was very early, because when this conflict started, I wanted to tell a story. A journalist who gets involved, but this story has nonsense, because the reality has gone over my idea, my story. I cannot tell this story because that was in 2021, and reality is overwhelming, and I cannot go back to that story. It's a horrible situation, and I cannot be away from that. I feel dissociation. I see things that do not correspond to reality. I have a theater play that is a comedy. It's strange to make comedies today. How come? Daughter has just finished her art studies, and with all that is happening, what's the point in being an artist? And to go back to Julio and La Pelota Vasca, that was the same year as Pelota Vasca.
With Isabel Coixet, yes. I will never forget that red carpet, Julio. Xavier, you and myself, we were there. Do you remember? It was crazy. You were so courageous. Yes, I also remember you showed great solidarity because you wanted to be with me. Yes, you were there just like a torero, Isabella and myself supporting you. There was a demonstration organized, and people were yelling, "Killer, killer, assassin killer," and there they were yelling at me. Imagine how terrible it was. I think it was TV5, television, asking people what they thought about the film. And, well, and they had not even seen the film, but they yelled that at me. And in the television, I was there, but it seemed as if I was not there. And people said, no, he didn't attend, he didn't go there. I was sitting there by the corridor, and there was a camera recording, but he never showed me so that I was seen on the screen. I arrived later, and then I was called coward, coward. It was really outrageous. It was crazy. And thank you again for being there. You were also, in the film Torremolinos, your sister Sofia worked with me, so you were like my godfather. You protected me so much. I could never forget that. But then you made a polyedric film, a film that was able to listen, and I created a simulation of dialogues in the editing because we could hear Ibarretxe, the president of the Basque Country, and Aznar. So I wanted to show very different people there. And, at that point, people were so afraid to speak up. So once I came into a certain relationship with them, I could realize that, everything was completely articulated in their minds. And during the editing, when I was simulating the dialogues, I did something I learned so much. It took me 1 year to edit the film. And it's true, I feel very proud. We have 5 hours, 3 chapters, and then the film, it is 2. So I had to go through all that, and it is true that reality is there for filmmakers and for scriptwriters. In Torremolinos 73, I worked with Juan Diego, a highly engaged person, Juan Diego. And I remember when he came to my house to talk, he knocked, and he said, "I'm Juan Diego." And suddenly, I had that feeling, so he came to my place, we sat together, and Torremolinos is a tragic comedy around a reality. And he said to me, Juan Diego, he said, Torremolinos 73 is a political film because it portrays the moments in the 1970s in Spain and how you portray those characters as if Spain was based or grounded on something empty. So it is true that films should not just be a PhD, I'm going to be talking about this or that, but in Torremolinos we speak about how difficult it is to make a child, to have children, or Abracadabra speaks about gender violence, or Robot Dreams also has its political component, so our gaze as filmmakers is always there. Politics is always there. Our position is there. So going back to what you were saying, you need to you are expressing yourselves maybe not in an obvious way. Juan Diego would speak about a dialectical relationship. Let's open the floor now to all of you sitting here so as to have some 10 minutes of dialogue before we close this table, this panel. A couple practical things. First, contractuality, contracts. In contracts, it was written that the final cut, if there is no agreement, the final word will be for the producer. And you said, what? And you are talking about the mutual agreement? In many different countries, it is even worse, and in others, it is better. So I think that here, That is something we have to consider. And then platforms and filmmakers. The director doesn't appear. I went to Netflix and I read big directors, and you click in there and you do not know who the director is. So that is another field for us to work and to speak about. In further panels, we will be talking about the promotion, the intellectual property. We have regulations that acknowledge the author as the core of the industry. Yes, authorship has to be protected because that is something, the only thing that is generating identity. So authorship is key, and we have to try and protect it, of course. And then we'll be talking later on about, with FERA, the European debate. Yes, we will be talking about, intellectual property. We'll be talking about it later on. Everything linked to our own existence, our own being on the papers, our signature. We were talking about editing, but you were speaking about that example referring to Netflix, right? I have had quite bad experiences in terms of the final cut. It seems as if we are not in a bad situation, but whenever there are disagreements, we can end up losing. We can still end up losing. I didn't lose, but almost. Final cut. I remember having David Finch in Madrid, and I remember that somebody asked, David, do you have the final cut? And he said, yes, but that's not important. He said, for me, the most important thing is that when I am with a studio or a big producer, I need to have the arguments so as to be able to show that my point of view is the best. And he insisted on that. Why are we doing something that not just having able to do it just like that? The most important thing is the film. Is the film. It is not my film. So a director has to be able to explain why it has to be like this or like that, and then being able to support it and defend it, go into the struggle. But you are talking about a situation where you have the film. But I have lived the initial cut. I had my daughter as a co-script writer, imagine, and that was thrilling because we were asked a film, something very specific, but the story, we were quite free. We started working, and then when we sat with producers, they said, yes, but we do not like the ending. No. And for us, that was essential to give it meaning. And my daughter said, but can't they say that? Can they? The big problem is, even when you do not have prior material, it is very difficult to support those ideas. And we have more and more interference also concerning the product that you are looking for, mainly when you're talking about commercial films. And they say, well, we know that this is not mass media. That is such a difficult conversation. But we know that things that nobody knows. The three films finalists, Sirat, Romeria, and Sorda, the three of them have been so successful in the box office, and they are highly personal films. Sirat, such a film as Sirat by Olivier Laxe. So that shows that nobody knows. The more personal the film, the most successful it can be. That is very important. That shows what is going on in this country. Three films having huge freedom. They are big box office success. And somebody says, oh, no, now thriller. No, nobody knows. So we just have to try and see. Whenever I release a film, on Friday, I feel like that before the premiere. And I said, oh, what's going to happen? What has happened? Well, Pablo, nobody knows what is going to be successful, but we know a lot about how to tell the story correctly. We know about the storytelling. That is something we know about. Nobody knows. Well, that does not mean that we, professional people, that we do not know what we are doing. Yes, we are storytellers. And I always say that the ball is in our roof. And that is why, yes, it is our ball. It is our product. We want many people to play with us. But we were the ones who wrote the script, the scenario. I had a different experience because my first 4 films in Spain, they were a flop. Vacas, Ardilla Roja, Tierra, well, Los Amantes was different, but nada meant nada, nothing. But I was able to sell them at the international level. So my producers kept on producing because I could sell it abroad. So I have had a bit of everything, but Ocho, 8 is a highly personal film. It was risky, daring film, very courageous, and we all thought that it was going to be successful in the tax office, but it wasn't like that. But we sold it in Latin America. I was in London Film Festival, and we have already been able to sell it in the UK. It was also in Malta Festival, in the Mediterranean Film Festival. It was given 2 prizes, a special prize of the jury and best screenplay. And now let's see what happens in Italy. But let's see what happens. So I don't know what to think. I'm thinking about my own films because sometimes, I don't know, in Spain I feel as if I am not understood in Spain. Well, I do not want to complain, but it is so sad, my situation. So I suffered a lot, yes, when the film was released, premiered in Malaga, even if it had the audience award. So I said, well, it's going to be successful. But then it depends on how the film is sold. It is true that we had very little money for promotion.
Es muy importante.
So it's very important to have this money for promotion. I have another idea for the next year. Julia, you say that new proposals can be made. Movies have a long life, fortunately. Something that doesn't work now, they become cult films and they have a long life if people allow them to exist. Let's talk about the conservation of our film archives. It's the collective memory of this country. This is a serious problem. Many of our movies are disappearing. It's difficult to get them, to have access to old movies. Maybe you can see them in some other platforms, but it's difficult to make them survive. My film Ocho is having very good viewing results in Movistar Plus. That's an opportunity in platforms. That's an interesting opportunity in Spain. Microphone, please. You spoke about the box office in Spain. Can you introduce yourself, Elena? Elena Taberna, director, scriptwriter, and producer. One of the pillars, essential pillars to speak about authorship is the situation of the exhibition of movies here in Spain. And the great party of the cinema, or the proposal by the state attract people to the theaters, but the spectators can go and watch Spider-Man, but there's no protection of Spanish movies. There's no quota for Spanish movies because they need to have a life in the box office, because there's a huge production of independent films, but there are very little number. There are very few cinema theaters, and it's a suicide because the cinema goers are fewer and fewer, and the times for screenings are too late or too different. Or 10:30 at night, that's too late. And if it is screened at 4:30 p.m., 4:03 p.m., it's easier. You said that you had a success in the 3 films. They have very good results and awards, etc. But we worked for the exhibition and the distribution. And so some of the films have had a very good promotion with a good distributor, with support by El Deseo and Almodóvar. And probably if these 4 elements wouldn't have existed, the movie would have been a flop in the box office. What happens with the rest of good films that are made in Spain? 30, 40, 50 very good movies in Spain, but they are not supported and they're not going to exist because they don't have these 4 pillars of support. So even if you have the 4 pillars, it's difficult. Otherwise, you don't exist. If we ask film academics in Spain, it would be difficult to really find dozens of movies in Spain which have really worked. The problem is exhibition and distribution. It's a scandal because there's no second chance. What happens with those movies that nobody wants to watch, the stories of our lives, lots of women's movies, new directors are happy to be in 5 cities for 5 weeks. That's nothing. The next week there's a new movie because for the distributors, it's better to change and instead of showing Spanish movies. So we need a law to defend and to protect Spanish movies, Spanish films. There should be requirements. Let's insist on exhibition and distribution. Otherwise, we will disappear. The cinema theater should be the place for authors' cinema. If we make the same thing as platforms, this is nonsense. Cinema theaters should have different types of movies. We are losing the audiences that love art and culture. We should attract another type of audience in cinema theaters. Commercial movies are already on platforms. We as authors, we need to open up a new way for a different audience. People who stopped watching movies in theaters during the pandemic, they want to go back. And they said to me, "Oh, your movie is not there anymore. After 5 weeks, your film is not programmed anymore." We could have a second cycle, a second premiere, if there was an obligation. Successful films should be re-premiered sometime later to have a second life, because it's money. 130 movies with an average budget of 1.5 million. Yeah, it has to be cost effective. I think that cinema goers should have more choice in theaters. I totally agree with you, but those 3 successful movies have been a miracle. They couldn't even expect. Cirat, Opera Prima, Leti, and I think 1 out of 10 movies have this success, and it's great. And they didn't even expect to have it. Since the pandemic, we never recovered. France has gone up, but Italy is recovering. I was promoting in Italy, and people go back to theaters. We have to revolutionize exhibition and cinema theaters. We have to go back to dialogue, the presence of directors during promotion of movies. I'd like to go back to the origins. The film schools. There's a new program which starts in September, where in schools and colleges can ask for this program, cinema in schools, the basis. We have a daughter, and she's young, and young people don't go to cinema theaters. So instead of watching it on TV or from a streaming service, they have to be taken to cinema theaters as in their classroom, as a school. Allow me to wrap up, because we are going to be pushed out of this room. Thank you very much for your presence. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Gracias,
Gracias.
Inés.